Well, the Stanley Cup Finals are here, and the NHL made it easy for you. You get a rematch from last year. It sets the stage for what could probably be a 7-game series between the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers. The first rematch since Red Wings Penguins back in 08-09. The last 3 teams to return to the Stanley Cup Final after losing the year prior have all won, so some good news there if you're Edmonton. However, reigning champions are 7-4 in Stanley Cup rematches, and it's hard to believe another team will ever catch a team as dominant as the Canadians were in the 50s. They won 10 consecutive, or made 10 consecutive Stanley Cups, I should say. They also have 5. The Islanders on this list with 5 as well. That feels a little bit more attainable if this squad can continue playing the way they have down in South Florida. But Paul Maurice's squad only focused on their 3rd appearance and bringing back another cup to South Florida. Well, the elbow room is waiting, and so is our former Stanley Cup champion in Pierre McGuire, standing by to break down the dominance of the Florida Panthers. I mean, Pierre, we saw the numbers in terms of the Panthers and where they stack up, but let's see where you have them as we compare them to some of the best that this century has seen on the ice. We're going to start with your number 5 team, and it's the LA Kings sliding into that 5 spot, Pierre.
And 5 for LA because of the fact they were so dominant. From 2010 to 2015, they were a real good team. They were an elite team, winning the Cup in 2012 and 2014. But, Haley, the biggest thing about L.A., the star power when you look at it. You know, you got a guy like Anze Kopitar that's still playing. You got a guy like Drew Doughty that's still playing. You had Jonathan Quick, one of the better American-born goalies, one of the best goalies that's ever played in the National Hockey League. The L.A. Kings, to me, really fit, especially after the salary cap era. They did a fantastic job there with Dean Lombardi, then Rob Blake, and Daryl Sutter as their coach, along with Todd McClellan. Lots of great things in L.A., and that's why I have them at 5 since the salary cap era started in 2005.
Let's go to number 4. That's where we find Pittsburgh. They have a total of 5 Stanley Cup championships. We know Sidney Crosby has helped them to 3. Those 2 names have kind of become synonymous with one another, Pierre. Why number 4 here when it comes to the Penguins?
Well, if you look at it, Pittsburgh Penguins had some real good success, as you talked about. They went to the Cup final in 08. They lost to Detroit. They went in 09. They won in an amazing Game 7 in Detroit at Old Joe Louis Arena. Then they went in 16 and 17. So 4 trips to the final over a course of time that Sidney Crosby's been there, and they win 3 of the 4. To me, the biggest thing about Pittsburgh has been consistency since Crosby's been there, and that consistency only just started to go away. They've missed the playoffs the last 3 years, and since 2017, they've only won 1 playoff series. So I think that's starting to fade away, but when you look at since Sid's been there, they're clearly one of the elite franchises in the National Hockey League.
Let's get that guy another Stanley Cup. I mean, my goodness, he is just one of the names you have to know when you're talking about the NHL. Let's go to your team at number 3, Pierre. It's where we find the current Florida Panthers. Maybe a little bit of recency bias for some of those looking at it when you think about what they've been able to do over the last few years. But I like the 3 spot for you here, Pierre. It gives them room to grow, but also recognizes what they've done recently.
I just have so much respect for what Billy Zito has done for this organization, what the Viola family have done as owners and stewards of the Florida Panthers, and the way the fans have rallied around this team. You know, Haley, my first ever head coaching win in the National Hockey League was in Old Miami Arena against the late Roger Nielsen and John Van Biesbroek and those Florida Panthers. That's a long time ago, Haley. That's 1994. So that's a long time ago. And I see what's gone on with the Florida Panthers and the greatness of Sasha Barkov. You see what they've done in Bill Zito's plan to identify character and grit, going out and getting Sam Bennett, trading for Matthew Tkachuk, adding a player like Nico Mikkola, going out and signing Sergei Bobrovsky. There's so many great things about the Florida Panthers. They're just starting to scratch the surface. And Haley, at the end of this year, I can tell you right now, they're going to have a wealth of cap room. They're going to be a dangerous team for a very long time.
I did want to ask you a follow-up there. You did mention Barkov. He won the Selke Trophy for the best defensive forward in the year, 2nd straight year. I'm curious, though, Pierre, when it comes to this number 3 spot, if the Panthers are to win another Stanley Cup, does that change your ranking at all with them at number 3, or you still think 3 is a good spot for them?
No, they're going up over Tampa. I'll tell you that right now, they will. But they got to win the Cup now. The thing that Tampa has over them, Tampa's won 3 Cups, and they went to 3 straight final. But here's the thing. They won the last cup before the salary cap in 2004 against the Calgary Flames. So I have Tampa at 2, but Florida would move above them if they were to win another cup.
All right, let's talk about Tampa. You mentioned it. They sit at number 2. I know Cat fans don't like to hear it that much, but man, this is becoming a hockey state here down in Florida, Pierre. What do you like about the Lightning and what they've done?
It starts, as we talked about with Florida, with Mr. Viola. How about Jeffrey Vinik, the owner in Tampa? You know what, Haley? He's just a phenomenal owner. I know sooner rather than later he's passing the reins on to a new ownership group. But if you look at it, since 2015, they lost in the Stanley Cup final to the Chicago Blackhawks. But you look at this just amazing array of success. In 2020 and 2021, I was there when they won the Stanley Cups. The 2020 Stanley Cup, they started in a pod in Toronto, finished in a pod in Edmonton. As hard as Stanley Cup as you'll ever go through to win. The next year they beat the Montreal Canadiens, and that was a limited size crowd again because of COVID. I have so much respect for Julien Brisebois, before him Steve Yzerman, but we talk about the greatness of ownership. Jeffrey Vinik's been an amazing steward as an owner of the Tampa Bay Lightning, but they are an elite organization with a ton of star power, and they've had it there for a long time, Haley.
How about this, Pierre? The last 6 Eastern Conference Finals winners have come from the state of Florida. So move over, Dolphins. Move over, Miami Heat. We are a hockey state here. All right, let's talk about your number 1, Pierre. It is the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, if you're new to this sport, I think fans might be scratching their head because over the last few seasons, we have not seen Chicago do very well. They made postseason runs from 2009 to 2017, and now they've only made it once over the last 8 seasons. So take us back to the good old days, Pierre, when the Blackhawks were a dynasty and why they are your number 1 team.
It started with their coach, Joel Quenneville, and went to their senior advisor, the winningest coach of all time, Scotty Bowman. It went to their 2 general managers, first Dale Talon, and then obviously Stan Bowman. But to me, the biggest thing about Chicago, consistency in the message. It was all about excellence on the ice. And whether it was Jonathan Toews, whether it was Patrick Kane, whether it was Corey Crawford in goal, whether it was Duncan Keith on defense, Brent Seabrook on defense, they had star power, they had great role players, they had a level of consistency that was really unmatched at that time. And I can tell you right now, just being around that group for every single cup they won, I marveled at the leadership of Jonathan Toews. He really is one of the truly great leaders they've ever had in the National Hockey League. I'm glad to see he wants to come back and play. Hopefully he goes to a market where he's got a legitimate chance to win the cup. Jonathan, go to Florida, by the way. And then we keep moving along, Haley. I got to tell you, I can't say enough about the fans at the United Center. That was an amazing place to broadcast games from. And in 1992, Haley, I was a coach of Pittsburgh Penguins with Scotty Bowman. We won the cup in the old Chicago Stadium before it was named the United Center. And I'm telling you, it was so crazy there. You could feel the floor shake when you're on the bench during the national anthem.
Wow. It gave me goosebumps a little bit there. It also kind of scares me a little bit, so I'm glad you're okay and still with us. Our Pierre McGuire giving us his best hockey teams in this century. Here's one final look at that list. It is Chicago Blackhawks topping at number 1. Think old Blackhawks, not the new ones. And then you got the 2 Florida teams in Tampa and Florida, although an important caveat, if Florida is to win the Stanley Cup this year, Pierre just told us he would move them ahead of the Lightning. And that list wraps up with the Penguins and the Kings.